Hello, fellow space-time travelers. My name is Roger Jones, and I'm coming to you from steaming downtown Pensacola, Florida. I am here to discuss big ideas in science, art, and society with you. Our last conversation was about not art. That's not art like a single word. Uh, Not art is just what you think it might be. It's what somebody thinks they are talking about when they look at an artifact and make the claim, that is not art. Her last conversation was about what you say to that person next. You might simply retaliate, oh, yeah, it is. Then your counterparty might say, prove it. At that point, you lost. You might as well go home and take a nap. The last conversation, which you can find a link to somewhere on this page, was about language. Not just the natural language we speak, but also other types of language such as music and sculpture. My suggestion was that to find out what something is not, you must express your investigation in the language of the something you are investigating. Well, that's a cryptic sentence, all right, but what it says is actually very simple. You cannot investigate what is not art by using the language and logic of natural language, for instance. You can only find out what is not art using the language of art. And I gave some examples from science and mathematics to illustrate the point, just to show that this occurs in nature. It's not just part of our imagination. In this conversation, I would like to continue the thought, but in the language of art, not the language of logic or natural language. You might say, however, why am I interested in not art? I'm an artist. I think I'm interested in art, not art. My response would be that surprises lie on boundaries. And we showed examples of that in the last conversation. Surprise is the essence of irony and humor. Irony is a synonym for humor. And great insight of any flavor is simply a very high quality joke that gives us tremendous childish pleasure. There you have it. One studies the boundaries between art and not art for puerile reasons that make us laugh childishly. But before we get any further into the conversation, we need to check out my t-shirt. Let me get here by the screen so I can see it myself. You see what it says? It's hard to see. It's a bunch of mathematical symbols, but if you let's see here, you see that better. It's a bunch of mathematical symbols and such, but if you look closely, you can see the word Bazinga spelled out. Bazinga. The word appears to be some kind of an equation, but it can be read in English, natural language, assuming that's English. Many people will recognize this neologism as the word the character Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory uses when he tells the punchline of a joke. Sheldon would like to make sure that the audience realizes that his latest utterance contains irony. This is an example of what we meant in the last conversation when we discussed self-referential systems that examine themselves. My t-shirt is ironic, is also self-referential. It is irony commenting ironically on irony. The ironic system is studying itself. If we want to understand what is not irony, we need to use the language of irony, that is, jokes, to identify where the boundaries of funny are. Okay. uh, well, okay, let's look at an example of popular culture uh, in which the limitations of self referential systems were recognized. All right, this is real culture. But what I'm talking about is pornography. In 1964, Justice Potter Stewart, the United States Supreme Court, wrote in a very solemn way, "I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, hardcore pornography. And perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so. But I know it when I see it, and the motion picture involved in this case is not that." Stewart realized that in the identification of not pornography, one could not use the language of legal logic. I guess Justice Stewart was advocating for judges to watch more pornography before they rule on what is and is not pornography. But then again, maybe I'm having too much fun with this line of thought. At any rate, let's get back to why we are having this conversation. We're here to use the language of art to search for a boundary between art and not art in a real example. Surprises occur at boundaries. Surprises are the basis of humor. So we might know when we are close to a boundary between art and not art when we start laughing. I'll tell the story without commentary on the meaning of the story. I will try to let the language of art do the talking. First, we need a little history. History of Pensacola, steaming downtown Pensacola. Pensacola's heyday lasted from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. During that time, the city experienced significant growth. Victorian neighborhoods were constructed, roads were built, storm drains were buried. I'm currently sitting and living in an old honeymoon cottage that was built in 1899. The historic African American center of the city is 2 blocks from my house. I have a little art studio in that neighborhood, which you can see in the photo. Terry and I also owned a vacant lot in the neighborhood. I was planning on setting up an urban art project on the lot, but I was having trouble having a good idea what to do. Fortunately, the problem solved itself. One day I noticed that the lot was filled with parts of storm drains. Apparently, the storm drains under the street had not been replaced since it was constructed in 1911. The contractors thought that our lot would be a good place to store the new drains while the old drains were removed. Well, I mean, this may sound strange to some people, but a very casual attitude towards private property exists in the Deep South, particularly if shootable deer live on the property. Well. To get back to it, all the blank vertical surfaces on the lot solved the urban art dilemma I was struggling with. We were not going to have an urban art project. We were going to have a suburban art project. Within hours, I'd started painting monsters and such on the storm drains. Also, within hours, a parade of Ford 5050 or higher pickup trucks parked on our lot, and the driver of each truck asked me the question after he turned off the engine, "What are you doing?" I thought it would be obvious what I was doing. I was holding a paintbrush and standing in front of a freshly painted concrete vertical surface. Finally, the biggest Ford pickup truck of all parked on the lot, and the president of the company asked me, "Are you the artist?" How great was that? That was just the question I was trying to address. At any rate, we worked it out, and the contractors became active participants in the project, making various suggestions. So I could have responded, "You will become one of the artists," but neither the president or the company knew that at the time. The puzzling thing to the contractors was that I was spending so much effort to paint drains that were going to be buried out of sight underground. I said that was indeed a shame, yet here I was doing just that. They suggested that I also paint monsters in the space under the manhole covers. Then workers will be surprised when they go down the drain. They will find large eyes staring at them in the dark. This great idea, of course, was immediately implemented. Some reporters started snooping around. I avoided them assiduously. Finally, the drains were placed under the street, which is where they are now, and maybe for another 100 years. Well, that's a story. I'm not going to comment on it. Make of it what you will. And that's it today, fellow space-time travelers. Be safe. And if you want our world lines to cross in the future, and space, go down to the link below and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.